Hi, welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a fun little project where I am simply using scraps and remnants from my stash. You know me, I love to use up what I already have, and so I've gone to my scraps and my remnants and I have pulled from those to make this cute little project. So let me share with you what this is. Last week, I uploaded a video for you which gave you three fun little block projects. One was a turkey, one was a pumpkin, and one was an acorn. And someone mentioned they'd love to see a squirrel, and I do have a squirrel pattern, and it's really a cute table runner, or you could use it for a pillow, or even one of those long pillows. You could use a table runner and make a long pillow with it. There's so many things you could do with this, so I wanted to share it with you here today. This is the table runner, and you'll notice that I have the squirrels facing each end of the runner. That way, when this runner sits on your dining room table, your centerpiece can go in this center section. I like to keep that rather simple because it's going to be covered with a center piece. Typically, in the fall, I have something like this that I will place on the center of my table runners. And then these squirrels are at each end facing the ends of the table. And of course, you can flip those around. You can make those squirrels go in any direction you want to. But this is the squirrel table runner that we're going to be working on today. And there's a fun triangular border there, really simple to make. So I'm going to show you this. The pattern itself gives you mirror images of these squirrels. So you can make them identical to one another, or you can make the mirror image. The other pattern would be the squirrel facing the opposite direction. And you'll get both of those template PDFs. You'll get both of those templates in the PDF that comes with the pattern. And I will have the pattern linked below in the description box. I brought you here to the tabletop, and the pattern will give you the fabric requirements. A lot of it is small little pieces, but I'll get to that in a moment. I have made one of the borders here with the triangles, the half triangles, and the end pieces. And you'll notice I've finished one of the squirrel blocks. He happens to be facing this direction. The pattern only calls for one acorn, the one that the squirrel is holding, but I decided to add some more to my block. So I've laid those under his tail here, and I just think that it just adds more to the picture of this fun little squirrel. And it's very simple to make. It's fusible, raw edge applique. For these templates, you'll simply just trace onto your paperback fusible the elements here, and you can trace as many elements as you need. There's the tail, the squirrel, he's going this direction. When you actually put the fusible onto the back of your fabric, this squirrel will end up facing the opposite direction. And then, of course, you get the mirror image elements and the acorn pieces and their eyes and nose and the opposite ear. And then you also get the templates for the triangular borders. And this triangle piece does have to be taped together, and you'll just follow the lines that are given there to be able to accomplish that. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I'm pulling remnants and scraps from my stash. So I had a remnant. It wasn't a full, might have been a quarter of a yard of this fabric, and I'm using that for the tail. I had this probably maybe not quite a half a yard, and I'm using that for the squirrel itself. And you can use any colors that you want. These just happen to be the colors that I've selected from the fabrics that I have. And then I went to my scrap stash and I pulled 3-inch squares, and I used this square for the tops of the acorns, and I've already cut 3 of those from that piece. And then I used this 3-inch square for the bottoms of the acorns, and I've already cut 3 from that. I used this square for the opposite ear here in the back. And I used a little piece of black fabric that I had in my remnant stash, and I used that for the nose and the eye. So that, and I've got some extra squares here, but I don't think I'm going to need them. I'm going to have plenty with just these little squares that I've pulled here to finish my nose, eyes, ear, and 3 additional acorns. And that's going to be paperback fusible that I'm going to accomplish here in just a second. I'll show you that for all of these aspects of this applique block. As you are aware, I love to try to use up my scraps whenever I'm appliquing. I like to pull from my squares if and whenever I can so that I'm not cutting into yardage. And so I recommend that you do that if you can. If you find the colors of fabrics that you'd like to use for your applique elements for whatever applique you're making, definitely do that so that you're not cutting into yardage or even cutting into fat quarters. It's better to try to find smaller pieces that you can cut into for any applique. Now, what I had done is I went to my paper back fusible, and I'm using a couple of different kinds here. I put them on top of the block so you can see them, and I used a pencil to trace. But this is a soft or a fuse, a soft fuse. This is called a soft fuse, and this is a light steamosine too. And I used a scrap of it that I had left, so I was able to get a lot of the elements traced on that. And then my two tails were traced from this soft fuse. And they're both paper backed. This one has paper on both sides. This one only has paper on one side. And what you're going to do then is take your elements and do not cut your templates from the PDF. Leave your PDFs intact. There's no reason to cut these elements out. Leave them just the way they are. Because this is raw edge applique, I've only allowed the template to print just the dark lines. That's the line that you're going to trace on. So what I did was I grabbed my paper-backed fusible. I put it on top of those elements, and I just traced as many as I needed in groupings. Try to put them all in groupings so that you can loosely cut around the grouping and then press it to the wrong side of that appropriate color. So I've got some acorn bodies here, the acorn heads here, so they're in little groupings. And I have the ear, the back ear here, and the eyes and nose here. So I'll be able to loosely cut those out and then remove the back of the paper and apply them to the wrong side of these elements, and then I can press them. I'm going to go ahead and loosely cut these groupings out. I'll be right back. Here you will see that I have removed the paper backing for the eyes and nose, and I pressed it lightly here. I'm going to have to take this to the iron and permanently press it, but I've placed it on there. They are removable until you press it with an iron. And so the ear itself, the back ear, is on the wrong side of that fabric. For the black fabric, it doesn't matter which side I place it on. There's no right or wrong. They're both the same. And then for the bottom of the acorn, I have removed that paper backing, and I've placed these three on the other side, or the wrong side of this square. And so I will get those cut out in a moment. For the tops of the acorns, I have removed that paper backing and placed them here. And as I said, they are movable. You can move them around until you press it. Once I press it with an iron, it's permanent. So these are ready to go. Now I wanted to share with you, this squirrel here was on a paper-backed light steamosine. And steamosine has two paper options here. So what you'll need to do for this, if you're using a light steamosine, remove the paper backing from the back of this squirrel. Make sure you don't take the adhesive with you. I think you can kind of see that adhesive. Just remove the backing that doesn't have any writing on it. Remove that, and then you can place it on the wrong side of your fabric. So there's the right side. I have placed it on the wrong side. And I can move it around as much as I need to until I'm happy with where I put it, and then I can press it. So that squirrel is done there. Now this soft fuse has the adhesive on one side and the paper only on one side. Therefore, I don't have to remove the paper from the back of that. I just need to place that adhesive on the wrong side of the fabric, and I will take it over and press it. And it kind of moves around. It's a different type of adhesive than what you're using in light steamosine. Every fusible that you use has a little bit different process that you'll use. But I'm going to take all of these now to my iron, and I am going to press them, which will make them permanently fused to the wrong sides of the fabrics. And once they cool, I will cut each of them out on the traced line. The pattern gives you the size requirements that you need for your block. I've got a 12.5-inch block here that I cut for the background of the squirrel. And now you'll see that I have all of my elements fused onto the wrong side of the various fabrics, and they're now cool, so I can simply cut them out on the drawn lines, and then I'll be able to remove that paper backing and place them on my block. So as you can see here, I've got everything cut out on the drawn lines, and I'm simply going to remove the paper backing from these elements, and then they're ready to place on the background square. I have folded this background square in the center and put a little crease in there just to kind of give me an idea of where the middle of it is. And now I'm going to go ahead and put this on here. Now, because he's got quite a tail, I'm going to just kind of lay that there for the time being. And then we are going to put this back here. I think I need to move it down. And the nice thing is you can just keep moving things around as you need to. Okay, I kind of like where that is. I'm going to have a couple of acorns be placed down here. And again, I've removed all the paper. And then I have this little acorn here where the squirrel is holding him. And his little ear will go back. This is the ear in the back of him. Put that there. Put this one here. That's his nose. And here's, whoops, his nose is a smaller one. And there's his eye. Whoops, I've got an issue with the nose there. Okay, I have all of the pieces where I like them. I might move the squirrel over a little bit because there's not a whole lot of room here and there's more room on this side. So I think I'll move the whole squirrel over. I kind of like where he's located top to bottom. I could probably bring him up maybe another 1/4 of an inch. But once you're happy with the placement of the squirrel, then you can go ahead and take it to the iron and press it. Once it's pressed, it's permanent. And so I'm going to go over to the iron and move things around a little bit, then I'm going to press it and I'll bring it back and we'll be ready then to get some appliquing done. I am using a wool type thread here. It's called woolly poly. It's a polyester wool, kind of very fuzzy. I used this when I did the log cabin, the pumpkin log cabin mystery quilt this year. And I love this. And so I'm going to applique all of the lighter elements with this. And I'm going to applique the darker elements, his tail, eyes, and ears with this. I am using an edge stitch, a straight edge stitch, all the way around the elements of this squirrel. That's how I'm going to applique it, just like I did here. It was a simple straight stitch along the edge of each of these elements. You can certainly use a blanket stitch, you can certainly use a fancy stitch, but when there's lots of small elements like that, I think the easiest way and the nicest way for it to end up looking is just by using a straight stitch right along the very edge of the applique piece. I've threaded my machine, so I have the woolly poly thread in there. It's a real fuzzy thread. I had to use a needle threader to accomplish that. This thread is available at Superior Threads. So if you go out to Superior Threads, you can find that thread out there. And what I'm going to do now is I've got my bobbin thread in. I've just got a cream colored bobbin thread in. I am going to draw my bobbin thread up here. Every time I start an applique, I start with both threads on the top, and I'm going to get as close as possible to the edge. And I still have my piecing foot on, but you can put on an applique foot, which allows you to see more of the area that you're appliquing. And you're simply going to start stitching as close to the edge as possible. I forgot to hit, I've got a button on my machine where it will stitch 3 times in one spot to lock the stitch there. And what you can do if you don't have that stitch is simply turn your stitch length to 0 and it will stitch 3 times in one place to lock it, and then bring your stitch back up to 2.5 or whatever stitch length you plan stitch length you plan to use. So I am going to stitch in place there. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to just go ahead and take your time, staying as close to the edge as possible. And when you get to these small areas here, the acorn and the little paw, you might want to reduce your stitch length, which will help you as you're going around some of those areas. My acorn matches, it's very, very similar to the fabric that I used for his little paw there for the body. So it's kind of hard to see that. You might want to use a darker acorn bottom fabric so that you can actually see the difference there. So it makes it kind of hard for me as I'm appliquing. But I'm simply just going to go all the way around all of the elements, edge stitch all of them down. For the little eyes, you can either go around in a circle and edge stitch those down, or you can do X's, whatever you feel. I think this little nose, I might do an X because he is so small. The eye, I will be able to go all the way around and edge stitch that. So I'm going to get the edge stitching done for the applique of my squirrel and all of the acorns, and then I'll go back to the tabletop. When I begin and when I end appliquing, what I'm going to do, there's a locking stitch here that I can push, and that makes it sew in place 3 times. And then I am going to take my thread and I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread so that the bobbin thread is cut up here, and so is that top thread. I've done that at the beginning and at the end of every line of stitching. And that way the loose ends are within the fabric itself. So now my block is finished and I can get it sewn to the table runner that I've started. And in case any of you are wondering, this is a 100% polyester embroidery thread. I have purchased these from Thread Art. I have probably 75 different colors of embroidery thread, and I love it. I use it for art quilts. I use it for thread painting. I use it for applique. I love it, and it's threadart.com. I'll leave a link in the description box below, and I'll also leave the Superior thread link so that you can go out there and find whatever threads that you might be interested in. So those were the 2 threads that I used, this woolly poly from Superior and this embroidery thread from Thread Arts. You can add your squirrel blocks on each end of this table runner, any direction you'd like. I'm putting mine so that the squirrels will face in that direction. This center block here is a very simple one. I like to keep the blocks very simple for the center of my table runners because I normally have a center piece sitting here, so it doesn't have to be fancy. You're not going to be able to see much of it. It does require some templates, and they are attached in the pattern. It's basically a 4X is what we're creating here for this particular block. And you're going to need to cut these out for the borders. These are the triangles and end triangles for the borders. And these are the triangles that you're going to use to create your center block. And I just used this like a paper pattern, and I pinned it onto a strip. I cut out a strip of fabric, and you only need 2 of the lighter color and 2 of the darker color. Very simple to make. And then you sew these together, and then you sew these together. I liked to press my seam allowances open, so they are all pressed open. Everything lays nice and flat when you do that. So that's how I've pressed the seam allowances for that. So just follow the instructions on getting that put together. And now I'm going to show you this border here in just a minute. In fact, this border works for a 12-inch block, for a 12-inch finished block. You can use this border that I'm sharing with you for any quilt that you might have that includes 12-inch blocks. So keep that in mind. So that part of this pattern can be used in other patterns as well. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this squirrel on so that they're both facing the end of my table. You can do yours any way you want. Maybe you want both of your squirrels facing this way. Maybe it's going on a hutch and you're only going to approach the table runner from one direction. So maybe you want both of your squirrels facing in one direction there. This is totally your choice. You go ahead and put those on there any way you'd like. I'm going to get that sewn on. I am going to press the seam open, and then I'm going to take you to the border and show you how that's done. The border templates are also included in the pattern, and I've got a link so you can go out to my website and purchase the pattern. It's going to be in the description box below. But the border templates do have a 1/4-inch seam allowance because you're absolutely going to need that. And for these border templates, you can either cut them out of the paper that like I have done, and then just make sure you keep this in a plastic bag with your pattern, or you can simply tape these together, and that we'll need to do. There are guidelines here on the second page and the first page as well. You'll line those up, you will tape that on there, and then you'll cut it out. Or you will take plastic template film and you will trace onto the plastic template film these two templates. You're going to need this one and this one. This template A here, which is the end piece, is going to be flipped back and forth. If you cut out your fabric where it's on the fold, you're then creating both the mirror image each time you make a cut. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I taped my longer triangle template together, and I did cut it out on the dotted lines. There's a 1/4-inch seam allowance around each edge of these templates that you need for your seam allowances. So I have one border done here, and in order to cut out these templates, I simply cut 2.5-inch wide with the fabric strips to actually place these templates onto those and trace them and cut them out. And then of course, when you are tracing these on the fabric's on the fold, it's folded, so in this case, it's wrong sides together. But if I trace it out and cut it out here, I am getting a mirror image of this particular template. So I'm getting both ends that are required. And so go ahead and get the required number of large triangles cut and the required number of end units cut in the various colors. And you'll see here that I've got some laid out. And so we start with the end unit here, and we've got the longer triangle here that's lighter. And you're simply going to lay these right sides together and sew 1/4 inch and press them open. And then you'll lay this one right sides together and sew a straight seam allowance there. Press it open, and that's how you're accomplishing this. And then again, you're going to lay this one right sides together on there and press it open and continue on down the number of triangles that you'll need. And again, I wanted to mention that using this pattern is something that you can use for quilts that use 12-inch finished blocks. It fits beautifully. So you're simply going to sew these together, as many as you need. In the case of this table runner, I'm using 3 of the lighter and 2 of the darker on the long rows, and they're finished with 2.5-inch squares of the lighter fabric. And then on each end of the blocks, we're putting one of the lighter ones here with the 2 end dark ones. And so I'm going to go ahead and get that pieced for the end on this side, and then I will finish piecing this longer unit here. I have both of my long borders finished here. One thing you want to keep in mind when you are attaching the end pieces, make sure that you're attaching them so that the slanted side of the end piece attaches to the slanted side of the longer triangle. If you try to attach it like this, it's just not going to work. Or if you try attaching it like that, this is the straight edge and not the slanted edge. If you're attaching the straight edge here, you're going to get a cattywampus unit. So be very cautious about that. Make sure that the slanted edge of that is going to be sewn here. So I'm going to flip it like this, pin it, and stitch 1/4 inch from there to there. I'll press it. Oh, you can either press your seams open or toward the dark side, whichever works for you. Once that is sewn on, then I'm going to take this one, and again, there's the slanted edge that's going to be pressed up or sewn to the slanted edge here. I'm going to flip that over and line that up and sew a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance there. That way you're going to end up with a perfectly straight rectangle. So I have all of the borders on the quilt. It is pieced. I can't wait to get it quilted and bound and on my table for Thanksgiving. What a fun quilt, our table runner this will be to have on my dining room table for our Thanksgiving meal. I hope that you'll all give it a try. The link below to the pattern is in the description box, so just check that out. It'll take you out to my website where you can get the pattern with all of the PDFs. And remember, these borders here with the triangles, I use these borders quite often. You've seen those where I've put them in many different mystery quilts, and I've taught you step by step how to put those together. It's a fast, simple little border, but it also adds some interest to the borders instead of just having plain strips. So hopefully you'll try that on another project, not just this one, but try it on some other projects as well. You can see I've put my centerpiece in the middle here, and it's just a simple 4X black pattern. You don't need much. You don't need anything intricate for the center because typically when you're using a table runner, you often have something, some sort of a decor that sits in the middle of it. So that's how I have accomplished that. A great pattern. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did putting it together. Very simple applique and piecing involved. If you like the content that I provide in my YouTube channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment, and share these videos with your friends, with your family, and your quilt guilds. That just helps the channel to get out to other quilters just like yourself, and I do appreciate that so much. So until next week, happy quilting.